Welcome to Gamecock Pod Live.
For the next 3 to 4 years, I'll be committed to the University of Gamecock.
This is Rodgers again to the 25, 20, 15, 10. Rodgers scores! Jackie Bradley Jr. delivers for the Gamecocks. Lost it up, looking for Kelly. Touchdown! Can you believe it?
And South Carolina is sending shockwaves through the SEC.
Plays it in at the buzzer! That's a win! Unbelievable! I don't believe it!
And now, live from Studio 54 of the Gamecock Pod Studios, here's the Cockfather himself, Keith Alsep.
All right, everybody, welcome into Gamecock Pod Live for May the 7th. I hope everybody enjoyed watching a very rainy, muddy track at Churchill Downs for the Kentucky Derby. And I hope everybody got to celebrate safely with yesterday, or not yesterday, but Monday was Cinco de Mayo. If you did have a margarita, I hope it was just one, or if it was 2 or 10, you had somebody drive you home. All right, we've got a great show on tap today. In just a couple minutes, we'll be joined by Alex Jones, who is fired up and already in the green room, ready to come out. As always, and then we'll be joined by Michael Sauls from Go Gamecocks and the State. With Alex, we're going to talk about kind of post-spring and looking at the portal, looking at some players maybe that made a jump, and then previewing a little. It's hard to imagine, but official visits begin later this month. So we got to talk a little recruiting. With Michael Sauls, we will discuss or debrief on the women's basketball season, Dawn Staley statue, and look ahead to next season. Morning, Craig. And so today's show, as always, is brought to you by Nana's Porch, the award-winning full-service catering company servicing the greater Charlotte area. They are your go-to for all your catering needs, whether it's a banquet, a wedding, a corporate event, an anniversary party, a birthday party, a graduation, bash, college or high school. Whatever your catering needs, Nana's Porch has got you covered. And when you're on the homepage at nanasporch.com, that's nanasporch.com, you can order plenty of Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. The toughest part is just figuring out how much of each flavor are you going to order. How many smoky jalapeno, how many regular flavors. After that, the rest is easy. You're just a few clicks away, affordably priced. Shipping is absolutely free of charge. Checkout is simple, safe, and secure. Nana's Porch award-winning pimento cheese. You'll love it. I guarantee it. All right, let's go ahead and bring in Alex. Alex, how's life treating you down in the capital city?
It's treating me good. Good to be back with you this morning. How you doing?
Doing well. Didn't know if we'd survive yesterday or not. We had flooding here, and it was raining so hard. I was going down the road, and I could barely see, but it looked like out in the field somewhere there was a 5 or 6 guys in robes that were building this big ass boat. And they had another 2 or 3 dudes in robes that were herding animals on 2 at a time. I didn't really understand. But later in the day, the skies parted, the sun came out, and by the time I got home, you couldn't even tell that it had rained, other than the fact that the power had gone out. But how are you, Alex? How did you celebrate Cinco de Mayo?
Yeah, had a little went out to a restaurant, had to celebrate, and it was good. Had a it kind of capped off a good weekend. I wanted to watch a little bit of the Kentucky Derby, didn't get to see a whole lot of it, but it was a good weekend overall, and I hope everybody had a good Cinco de Mayo.
Not a good weekend for Gamecock baseball. They were dominated by Florida and are headed towards a record-setting horrific season. South Carolina's never lost 28 games. They still got 2 SEC series to go and the tournament. They are already eliminated from postseason play. 26-23, 5-19 in SEC play. They begin a 3-game series at number 8 Auburn. And by the way, Auburn's number 4 in the RPI. And then they close it out against LSU, I believe. Softball, they will face Alabama today in a rematch in the SEC tournament. They are ranked number 12 and number 14 in the country. They finished 39-14 and 13-11. They just beat Alabama 2 out of 3 times. And they'll face the Crimson Tide again today in the SEC tournament. Ashley Chastain Woodard could be SEC Coach of the Year. She set a program record for wins with 39, and South Carolina had their first winning season in the SEC, Alex, since I think like 2015 or 2017. Pretty crazy.
Yeah. She's got a pretty strong case for SEC Coach of the Year. It's pretty incredible what she's done to that program. I think everybody kind of had a sense that maybe in time she would get that program back on track, back turned around. But taking it pretty much 1 year and got off to a hot start and got those non-conference series sweeps wins against Duke, and also had the Texas Tech one and played Oklahoma on the road in your first SEC series down to the wire. And really, each of those games were close, and they really have just taken off in the SEC and done pretty much. Obviously they're right now maybe right on the outside looking in of a national top 8 seed, but you make a little bit of noise in the SEC tournament, I think you got a chance to work your way back into that. Their RPI is pretty good right now. I think it maybe is 10th or so. So, you continue to win a few games in the SEC, which with how good the SEC is in softball, every win is going to be a good win in the SEC tournament. So find a way to make some noise, but regardless, they're in a pretty good spot heading into the NCAA tournament.
No doubt. I think Softball America currently has them as a 9 seed facing number 8 LSU, but they beat LSU 2 out of 3. South Carolina's RPI, I guess they had a few weak conference opponents, is dropped, while LSU, I guess, has played the meat of their schedule. Their RPI is up to number 4. All right, so the Welcome Home Tour hit Somerville earlier this week, and Shane Beamer, Alex, you could tell, is very frustrated with this Rasul Faison situation. It's kind of like the Bonnie situation in Pulp Fiction at this point. And that's all we're going to say about that. Watch the movie if you don't know what the Bonnie situation is. But he's visibly frustrated. Talk to us about Beamer's frustration and what that running back room looks like with Rasul Faison and then without Rasul Faison.
Yeah, I think you can understand his frustrations just because of, I think they would have wanted, obviously, he mentioned, every time they've asked for information, we've given them information. And it seems like they've had that, the NCAA's had that information for quite a while now and had enough to make a decision, and they still officially haven't. But I think you understand his frustration because they just went through the spring portal window without an answer. And you'd have to imagine that if they weren't going to have Rasul Faison and knew before the spring portal window, they would have done what they could in the spring portal window to see if they could find somebody. But, with Rasul Faison in that running back room, I think you feel pretty good about it. You got 4 guys that, I think you got Oscar Adaway and Rasul Faison in there who are some older guys in that room. And then you'd also have the younger guys who I think are starting to come along in Jawarn Howell and Matthew Fuller. And, if they end up, not having Rasul Faison, I think you start to worry just a little bit about that room, because then you only you have 3 scholarship running backs that you feel really good about. And in the SEC and really in college football, you need more than 3. And you could argue maybe you need 5 scholarship backs in it, but I think you feel okay with 4. But, then you've got, if Rasul Faison isn't eligible and you have 3, I think you worry about that room a little bit.
No doubt. So, Alex, is there anybody out there South Carolina could add? I mean, we know Georgia had a pretty good back that went in the portal, but there's no SEC on SEC crime in the spring portal, so that ruled him out unless, somebody's willing to sue the NCAA over that, and then he'd probably be eligible by mid-November at the rate they go. So is there anybody, I mean, is that a possibility for South Carolina to add a running back, or could we see them move a guy like Jaquel Hallman to running back if Faison's situation does not get sorted out sooner rather than later, like when summer workouts begin?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because from the portal standpoint, I think running back is such a priority position in the portal that, the top guys and really maybe even those kind of middle level transfer portal running backs, they're going to be taken up just because everybody needs running backs, it feels like these days. And so, obviously grad transfers, they can enter at any time, and, maybe they could, find somebody in that route if it did come to that. But the Jaquel Holman thing is interesting. There was a little bit of talk during his high school recruiting if he could play that running back position. And, I think he could. I think you would have to continue bulking up a little bit if he does, if that does come to fruition, because obviously he's working to play in that nickel spot kind of in the secondary. But if he did move to that running back spot, just need to get bigger and stronger. But that would add, I guess, another scholarship back. I think they would feel okay about it. And obviously maybe not from a year 1 standpoint of him playing that position, but I think they just hope it doesn't come to that. Because for one, Jaquel Holman, for him, I really like him in that nickel spot, working with Torian Gray, but I think they just hope it doesn't come to that.
I mean, is there anybody else on the roster? I mean, usually there's 2 or 3 guys, but I mean, that was the one guy that came to mind because it was discussed during recruiting, and the fact that he did play the position in high school. I mean, if Faison is ineligible, I mean, we've seen in years past South Carolina have 3 running backs injured at the same time. I mean, because that's why you would ideally prefer to have 5 guys. We're notorious for our 5 guys segment on Gamecock Pod Daily. Nothing to do with the hamburger joint, but I mean, they really cannot afford to miss him. Plus, he is probably the best back on the roster in the spring.
Yeah. I'm sitting here trying to think if there's anybody on the roster that could fit that running back spot. But Jaquel Holman, that was probably the one I would have come up with. And just off the top of my head right now, I can't think of anybody else. And so I think you'd have to imagine they would see if it does come to Rasul Faison isn't eligible. I think you'd have to find a way to see what you can find from a grad transfer or whatever is in their portal, just to add another back to that room. But I wonder if it is going to come to that. I think when you look around at other cases with Rasul Faison, it seems like it seems like it does favor him in terms of getting another year of eligibility. And, the NCAA has kind of been giving everybody another year of eligibility at this point when you look around at what they're doing. So I think you just hope it doesn't come to that.
All right, so South Carolina concluded. They had the spring game. Alex, I know you've got a great story up on the BigSpur.com on the freshmen that could play the most, and without, everybody needs to go to BigSpur.com and check that out for sure. But there were some intriguing names on there, starting with a guy that you and I have talked about, and a guy that I am super high on at the safety position. That is Kendall Daniels Jr., 6'4", 220. He's kind of a unicorn, Alex, in that he is a freak athlete. He's got unbelievable size, and he played high school quarterback and safety. And yesterday I basically broke down the secondary on my roster reset moves, and I look at it, and at corner you got Collier, Vakari Swain, Brandon Cizay, Miles Norwood, Jalewis Solomon, DeMarcus Leach at nickel. Kilgore's going to be tough to move, but if Vakari Swain comes back and he's really a stud the way that Brandon Cizay played, there could be a case made. He did start his career at the safety position, and the same one Nick Emanwari played. But Kilgore, they love him at the nickel. He had 5 interceptions, sealed 2 wins with interceptions. Had that massive one right before the half against Alabama. You got Zabari Sandy and Jaquel Holland. Him at safety, DQ Smith, David Busey, Peyton Williams, Gerald Kilgore, Kelvin Hunter,
Yeah, I think, when I was putting that together, I was trying to think of all the freshmen that I think are going to play the most, and he wasn't one of the first ones that came to mind. And after I thought about it, I was like, this guy's got a chance. Kendall Daniels got a chance to play a little bit, or a good bit this year. I think just I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be really good on special teams. We see every year, Shane Beamer and Joe DeCamillis. There's always a few freshmen that play on special teams. And last year, David Busey was, I think on every special teams unit. Michael Smith played a little bit of special teams. Fred Johnson was on every special team. So they like to have those guys, those freshmen that they trust on those special teams. And, I think you have to feel that Kendall Daniels could be one of those guys. But from a safety spot, they're still battling to replace Nick Emanwari. And, I think maybe, if you had to I had to choose one to replace him today, I think it'd be Peyton Williams to get that spot. But, they rotate a little bit there too as well, just to help keep guys fresh. And, you wonder if Kendall Daniels is able to kind of fill in that spot. But I think David Busey is going to have a little bit to say about that in that spot. I think he's got a pretty bright future, and I think he had a solid spring overall. And I think he's kind of an exciting, intriguing player when you think about it, just because he's a kind of a hard-hitting safety. He's going to come up and he's going to play the run, and he's going to kind of do it all for you. But, with Kendall Daniels, that you look at this guy that's at 6'4", I think right now, it kind of – you see a little bit of Nick Emanwari when he was a freshman, just from a size perspective, and it's really intriguing. I think he could end up being kind of that sneaky freshman right now that ends up playing a lot, because I think in that freshman group, you think about those wide receivers, and when I chose those 5 or 6 players, I could have probably just listed all the freshman receivers of who were going to play the most, but kind of wanted to spread it around a little bit. But I think Kendall Daniels is one that could be a sneaky good freshman season if he puts it all together.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the freshman wide receivers, they get the most buzz, particularly Brian Rowe and Malik Clark. I think Donovan Murph, though, who will arrive early next month, is a guy. So, again, everybody check out Alex's article. It's a VIP story, so we're not going to go through that. So, Alex, in the autopsy of spring practice, give me maybe 3 players on offense that you thought ended up having a better spring than maybe what you thought, or maybe just 3 guys that are stock up for their performance during spring practice.
At quarterback, we'll start Cutter Woods. I think he had a really good spring, and obviously Norris is going to be quarterback one, but that quarterback two battle is something that's going to continue on into summer, into preseason camp. I think Cutter Woods had a pretty strong spring practice, and just heard that he picked up the offense pretty quickly, and he had obviously, I know we talked about it, had a really good spring game, came in and was throwing the ball around the yard, had a deep pass on his first attempt, and I think he had a really solid spring. And running back, I think Matthew Fuller continued to get better and more comfortable throughout the spring. And you can kind of hear Markel Blackwell talking during his spring press conference about just continue to bring him along. And when it's good, it's really good. Is what he said. And I think it was just continue to be more consistent, learning what to be an SEC back. But physically, he's one that he could play right now, and he could have played last year physically. And just a guy that he finishes runs, he gets downhill. He just attacks. I think he's one that, from what we're talking about in that running back room, like I'm interested to see how much of a role he plays this year, because still going to be battling with Jawarn Howell and Oscar Attaway for carries. But I'm interested to see Matthew Fuller this year. And I think for another player, I would probably go. I think Mazio Bennett maybe had a really solid spring overall. Obviously, he didn't play in the spring game, but I think as Shane Beaver said, tweaked his leg a little bit in the day before the spring game. But I think that's pretty big, just because we've been talking about those wide receivers, the freshman guys, but need those returning guys to come along. And I probably could even say Nick Harbor for this one. I think Nick Harbor had a really good spring, and they need him to take that next step in spring practice just to continue to be a better overall receiver. So, I'd kind of maybe for that third player group in Mazio Bennett, or even those returning receivers, like I grouped them all together. I think Mike Frey has done a good job of those guys, and need those older receivers to continue to come along to help those freshmen out as well.
All right, good stuff. So how about same question on the Gamecock defense? 3 players that are stocked up after spring practice and the spring game.
Yeah, we'll start with Fred Johnson. I think he's kind of taken over as a leader in that linebacker room, and I think we kind of saw what he could do last year when he got on the field. Like, he was kind of fit right in with those trio of linebackers with Debo and Bam and D Knight. Like, he really kind of fit in with those guys and played at a pretty high level when he got in there. But now he's got that year under his belt, and it seems like he's picking up the playbook even more comfortable in the system, and he's going to be a leader in that linebacker room. And I think you'd have to pencil him in as a starter right now for what he was able to do. And on that defensive line, I think Gabriel Brownlow-Dindy will be a guy to watch. I think he's one that when you look at his time at Texas A&M, Texas A&M always recruits really well interior defensive linemen and really on the defensive line. And I think he battled a little bit of an injury when he started his Texas A&M career, and I think he just maybe got a little bit behind those guys that are on the depth chart. But he's a guy that you can see the potential in high school. A guy that I think he was either a 5-star or kind of a borderline 5-star. He was in that really good Texas A&M class that Jimbo Fisher built. But they need guys in that defensive tackle room to step up, and I think Brownlow-Dindy had a pretty solid spring overall, and that was huge for those guys, because that's a room that I think had some questions coming in to spring practice, and obviously now they got Troy Pikes coming in, which was a big help as well. But I think Brownlow-Dindy had a nice spring overall.
All right, good stuff. All right, so for the second straight season, South Carolina made the decision. Shane Beamer said he and Joe DeCamillis that there was not a better kicker in the portal. But for the second straight year, they do not bring in an experienced kicker. And it's probably going to be a true freshman. Mason Love is going to be the punter and the field goal kicker. Hopefully, Max Kelly can come in and be the kickoff guy. Your thoughts on a potential playoff team for the second year in a row not trotting out an experienced kicker?
Yeah, I think just you would wonder about just from an inexperienced standpoint, because Mason Love, I think we've seen he has the leg. Like in the spring game, they were doing like the little field goal competition, and he was getting all of his kicks. Like he was kicking it, I think it was like a 40-yard field goal, and it was almost going over the net. So you don't doubt his leg. Like I think he can really do well at that field goal spot as well. And from a punting standpoint as well, I think Kai Kroger spoke pretty highly of Mason Love and how good he was as a freshman. And I think he's ready to take over both of those spots. And I think it's just one of those where you have to see it in the Virginia Tech game, or because he's kicked in front of fans, but not in those big time moments. But I think obviously those guys evaluate every game or every practice, and they put those guys in as much pressure situations as they can, and they obviously feel good about what Mason Love can do at that spot. And from a kickoff standpoint, I think you do hope that somebody else can handle that, just because handling two positions is going to be it's going to be a lot for Mason Love, just because you want to be able to make sure, as Shane Beaver mentions, make sure that he's maximizing his potential at both of those spots. So if you let somebody else handle the kickoff duty, Mason Love can handle that the field goal and punting situation. But it's really interesting because special teams is not just field goal and place kicker. Like, there's a lot they had to replace special teams. The holder's got to be replaced. Kai Croker did that. Hunter Rogers was the long snapper, basically these past 3 years, and was really good at it. They got to replace that as well. They got some guys there as well. Kyler Farrow, a freshman's coming in, could be a guy that takes that spot as well. But a lot of new faces on special teams, and they're going to have to put it together pretty early and be ready to go early on.
So I really wish Luke Doty would be the holder on field goals and extra points, because I'm not taking anything away from William Joyce or Peyton Argent or any of those guys. I know they work together and are separate from the team most of the time, but with Kai Kroger, it was almost like you had a quarterback. You had a big athletic dude that could run and that could throw the football. And I think, Luke Doty could be a weapon, the same type of weapon South Carolina had for 4 or 5 years of Kai Kroger.
That would be intriguing. And that holding position, I think Kai Kroger and whoever has made it look really easy, but it's not an easy position to play. Like, you got that snap coming at you fast. You got to get the ball down. You got to turn the laces out. Like, there's a lot that goes into a short amount of time. And, Kai Kroger did it really well. And, we'll see who ends up being it, but Luke Doty there would be intriguing, just because, one, he's had the experience of playing, in big moments and both on offense. Like, he's got that experience, and he could do a little bit of the throw, and he could do a little bit of the running. So that would be intriguing. It'd be interesting to see if that's something they've thought about, because that hasn't come up, but it'd be intriguing.
All right. So, Alex, talk to us a little bit. Give us the rundown on the latest transfer portal edition. Offensive lineman Nolan Hay, 6'4", 309 from Incarnate Word here in Texas. He's a Texas native. He's played center, guard, and tackle. Talk to us about Nolan Hay.
Yeah, he's a guy who, I think that when you look at that offensive line room, they lost a little bit in the transfer portal. You lost Shakai Moore, who kind of played it all for you, could play every position, but they also lost Cam Pringle, a guy that I think you were intrigued by the potential. Maybe it wasn't going to be this year for Cam Pringle, but a few years down the road, what he could be. But you bring in Nolan Hay, because I think and we've talked about it a lot before, that the numbers there, they want to make sure the numbers are good there, just they don't want to have a 2023 season have again with those injuries. But bringing in a guy like Nolan Hay, who's going to be an experienced guy, he's a guy who I think could fill in for you at multiple positions. He's played a little bit of everywhere during his time in college, but I think it's just bringing in a guy that's another older, experienced guy, and another guy that at the very least can be a depth piece for you that can really fill in at just about every spot.
No doubt. All right, so the coaches have been out on the road. I think maybe they're still can be out on the road for another week or so, or maybe, I don't know, maybe the dead period is coming up. But official visits begin in earnest. I guess it's after Memorial Day weekend, Friday, May 30th.
Yeah.
9 guys right now slated to visit that weekend. Borderline 4-star edge rusher Rodney Dunham, who did commit to Notre Dame, so I don't know if he's coming. 4-star defensive tackle Pierre Dean from the Winston-Salem area. 4-star corner Kari Adams, 6'2", 175 from the DMV. Travis Johnson, a speedy wide receiver, 6'3", 185, another 4-star guy from Chesapeake, Virginia in the 7.57. Massive offensive tackle, J.B. Shabazz, 6'7", 295 from Kernersville, which is right outside Greensboro. Used to play golf there at the golf course in Kernersville. Then you got 4-star defensive tackle Ben Boulware from Winston-Salem, 6'5", 305. Jacksonville defensive tackle Brian Harris, who decommitted from Maryland. I think South Carolina's in great shape there. Defensive back KJ Johnson out of Birmingham, long, athletic corner, 6'2", 175. And then big JUCO defensive tackle 7, Cloud, a native of Georgia, committed to Georgia at Butler Community College. I mean, that's a star-studded visit, Alex. Are there 2 or 3 guys you feel best about from that first weekend?
Yeah, I think you mentioned Brian Harris. I think South Carolina's been a good spot for him for a little while. You know, a guy that's 6'3", 280, that defensive line spot. They are recruiting pretty heavily. He's a guy that was committed to Maryland, you know, backed off that commitment. And, you know, Alabama offered pretty recently, so, you know, maybe keep an eye on that. But, you know, I think they've done a pretty good job of building that relationship pretty early, and it seems like they're in a strong position there. And, you know, KJ Johnson's another one. I think when you think about him, kind of keep an eye on Ole Miss as well. But, you know, South Carolina kind of got on him a little bit earlier than everybody else. And I think Torian Gray and those guys have built a pretty strong relationship. And, you know, I think, you know, from the rest of this group, you know, Pierre Dean's kind of an interesting one. Like, you know, listed as an offensive tackle right now, but when you look at him, like, you wonder if he could play defensive line as well. And I think it could be one of those where they get him in and bring him in and kind of figure it out from there. But you could see just from that frame, I think he's 6'5". What do we have? 6'5", 255. Like, you know, you wonder, you know, is he quite big enough for that offensive line spot, and could he play that defensive line spot? But, you know, I think if they were to get him, they're going to battle Georgia for him. I think that's kind of a two-way battle right now, and maybe Ohio State is in there for him as well. But, you know, it's going to be interesting to see what can happen there. And, you know, Corey Adams, you know, pretty much a 5-star type of guy. That it's going to be a battle for him. You know, Penn State, Notre Dame, those teams are really, in Oregon as well, are really, you know, battling for him. But South Carolina's kind of been in the game for a little while, and they're going to have their shot on the official visit. But, you know, for a first official visit weekend, you know, that's a pretty, you know, loaded list. And, you know, I'm not 100% sure if Ronnie Dunham is going to be in. You know, we'll see, just because of, you know, guys that are committed. Sometimes they won't take those visits, and I don't know for sure one way or the other. Kind of same goes for Gordon Sellers that next weekend. But, you know, from overall, even without Ronnie Dunham on that list, that's a pretty nice start to an official visit weekend.
No doubt. So the next weekend, there's just some interesting ones I want to mention. You got the Harris brothers, Aiden and Andrew Harris. Aiden, a high 4-star guy that's being recruited as a defensive tackle. Andrew as a kind of outside linebacker edge from the Charlotte area in Matthews, North Carolina. You got Landon Duckworth coming in, Noah Clark, a big defensive tackle out of Durham, North Carolina, and then Ryan Mosley, 4-star wide receiver from Carrollton, Georgia. Yeah,
the Harris brothers, it seems like South Carolina was actually in a pretty good spot there. You know, Aiden Harris is, as you mentioned, kind of a pretty highly ranked guy that's got a lot of players or teams coming after him. I think with them, with both of those guys, I think NC State is going to be one to watch for those guys. But I think South Carolina's put themselves in a pretty good spot. It's been kind of interesting recruitment. Like it wasn't too much going on about with those guys, but you know, then all of a sudden South Carolina really surged in this recruitment, and I think you're in a good spot overall. And you know, you mentioned some of the Ryan Mosley's a guy that they've been after for a while. Georgia, Nebraska, you know, Texas A&M also battling for him, but you know, South Carolina's going to get him in and take their shot. And Landon Duckworth's got the official visit scheduled. I think we've all talked about that guy and you know what the story is there with him. But you know, again, that's another guy that they'll get in there and get their shot. But it's another solid list for that weekend. Kosi Barnes and Joel Combe are two guys that have kind of emerged here late in this past few weeks to schedule official visits, but kind of guys that you know Torian Gray and them have evaluated here pretty lately, and you know, obviously there's a lot of interest there on both sides. So go ahead and schedule official visits.
So the only visit scheduled for Father's Day weekend is Julian Walker. I think that's because his father is in Columbia. One of the strength coaches, former head strength coach at Arkansas, and a guy that, Alex, I think is still probably underrated at a 91. And so you got him, and then that last weekend, 5-star offensive lineman Darius Gray, maybe the top corner on your board, and Samari Matthews from Huff High School in that Charlotte area. Tamari Watkins, the big safety from Northwestern High School in Rock Hill, and then Desmond Green, who they've been battling Georgia for, but maybe the tide's turning a little bit here. 6'5", 354 from Timberland High School there in St. Stephen's.
Yeah, to start on Julian Walker, like I think it's kind of one of those where with his dad being, on the strength staff, like official visit may not even be needed just as much for him just because he's been around the program so much, he's visited so much, but he's a guy, you mentioned maybe being a little bit underrated, and I think he's going to continue to climb the rankings because he's just now really becoming a known guy, and you can see kind of the respect people have for him to go ahead and list him as a 4-star, and you don't find too many edges in the high school ranks that are 6'6", 230 already, and he's just a guy that is going to continue to get better and bigger and stronger, and really intrigued by him. And into this last weekend, Darius Gray, maybe one of their guys that's a top of the board guy, regardless of position. And you could probably say the same thing about Samari Matthews. And with Gray, I think they're in a pretty good spot as well. He's got a lot of official visits scheduled. I can't remember the exact number, but he's going to a lot of different places for visits. And you just get him in on that visit that weekend. I think you feel pretty good about where you stand just because of the relationship you built with him and how long you've been recruiting him. And with Samari Matthews, he's another highly ranked guy, and he's another one that I saw him at the Charlotte Under Armour camp, and he was dominant. I mean, he's really good and one of the best corners in the country. And I think Clemson, you think about there to watch for them, but then really watch Texas as well. I think Texas has kind of come in late and could end up being a 3-team battle, but he's visited South Carolina so many times and built a relationship with Torian Gray, and I think he's close with Jasavian Currents as well. And I think he told me at that Charlotte Under Armour camp that Jasavian always recruiting him and trying to get him to South Carolina. But it's another good Jasavian will be in that weekend as well. And so we'll see. Tamarian Watkins is another interesting one. Like he's kind of this past year really kind of emerged and become one of the better prospects in the state. And Desmond Green, you mentioned that's going to be a battle. I think could be a battle down to the wire with Georgia. And then Trey Aikens, another in-state offensive lineman that I think watch Georgia Tech there. I think Georgia Tech has kind of emerged in this one, and South Carolina's also battling too. I think South Carolina's near the top of the list, but those would be the two schools, and I think you could throw in Florida and NC State with him as teams to watch with Trey Aiken.
Alex, great stuff as always. Can't thank you enough for joining in. Very insightful and recruiting and welcome homes are just around the corner, Gamecocks, and Alex, Hale, JC, Tony, they've got it all covered at thebigspur.com. Alex, I can't thank you enough. Be well, my friend, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Awesome. Always appreciate being on. See you next time.
Yep. All right, that was Alex Jones. Let me tell you, today's show is powered by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to turn your sports knowledge into cash. With millions of members, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just download the app and pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. With Prize Picks, you can run your game all season long. This week on Prize Picks, I've got Derek White for the Boston Celtics going over 15.5 points. I've got Jason Tatum going over 27 points tonight. I think this is going to be a huge Tatum game. And then OG Anunoby, who went off in the last game for the Knicks, I've got him under 16.5 points. That is my Prize Picks lineup for today. So now you can cash in on the basketball playoffs with Prize Picks. Don't miss your last chance to add your favorite players from the court to your Prize Picks lineup, whether it's points, rebounds, assists. Take your pick of more or less for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your cash. Like, I'm always taking the over on Nikola Jokic, points plus rebounds plus assists. That number, I'm always taking that. Starting with the play-in round, every lineup you make on Prize Picks will enter you in the Take 2-ticket sweepstakes, which could get you and a +1 a VIP championship or a VIP trip to the NBA championship. The app is easy to use to create your lineup. All you have to do is pick more or less on a few players' stats for your shot to win up to 2,000 times your money. Prize Picks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Let's say it's looking like OG Anunoby's going over 16.5. I can just go ahead and cash out and still get 2 times my winning as long as Derek White and Jason Tatum hit. Prize Picks also puts their members first, so withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I get my money in 15 minutes or less. Prize Picks offers Venmo, Apple Pay, MasterCard, and more for quick and easy deposits into your account. Every Tuesday now, it's Taco Tuesday. Prize Picks will discount several projections on the board by 15 to 25%. This week's Taco Tuesday pick, even though it's a Wednesday, for me is going to be Al Horford. All he has to do is get more than 4.5 points. That's a winner. And then on Friday is Flex Friday. Make sure you opt in and tap the checkbox in your lineup builder to be eligible for the projected play. All right. So all you have to do is download the app today and use the code Gamecocks to get $50 instantly after you make your first $5 play. Download the app in the Apple Store or the Google Play. Enter the code Gamecocks to get $50 instantly. You don't even have to win your first $5 play. All you have to do is make that first $5 play, get $50 added to your account. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, let's go back out to the capital city and bring in our guy from Go Gamecocks and the state, and that is Michael Sauls, formerly of Gamecock Central. Then went to Virginia for a while, got the opportunity to cover the Gamecocks. That's a no-brainer when you're a South Carolina grad.
Yep.
So welcome home and welcome back in, Michael. How's life been treating you in the capital city?
I appreciate it. It's been good. Still having to readjust, I guess is the way I should put it, to the fact that, in Virginia, there are seasons. South Carolina, there are no such thing as seasons. So having to readjust to that, but shouldn't take too long given that I've lived all but 2 years of my life here. But other than that, it's good to be back. Work's been good, and appreciate you having me back on, Keith.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. So South Carolina fell just short of going back-to-back for 2 in a row. They made it to the national championship game. Even after the Ashlyn Watkins injury, which when that occurred and the news came down, I didn't really give them much of a chance to win the SEC, which they did, win the SEC tournament, which they did, or make it back to the Final Four, but they did. Just your overall assessment of the season, considering you lose Camila Cardoso and, you know, it looks like Ashlyn Watkins is going to be that rim protector, big-time rebounder, and then you lose her to still make it back to the national championship game.
Yeah, you know, I think Dawn Staley has set such a high standard in this program over the last couple of years that everyone was disappointed that they didn't win it. And I mean, yes, obviously, if you make it to a national championship and you lose, you're going to be disappointed that you didn't win. But I also think the season as a whole is still a success. Like, you don't want to hear that. You don't want the moral victory. But the fact that you do lose Cardoso and then you lose the heir apparent to Cardoso and you still make it all the way and you're playing as good as they were without Ashlyn and stuff like that. I mean, it's still, I felt like it was a success. And I know, you know, now that Mylasia Fulwiley is gone, but this kind of quote is kind of not really usable anymore. But I remember I talked to Mylasia briefly during one of the open locker room sessions at some point during the tournament. I couldn't tell you which one it was now, but she essentially said something along the lines of, I mean, it was look at how this team is playing now, and Ashlyn's not even there. Like, imagine how it's going to be next year when Ashlyn is back. So all that to say, I still think it was a successful season. Obviously, every South Carolina fan would have wanted to come back with a national championship under their belt again. But, I mean, they've done what they needed to do in the offseason, kind of add what they needed. So I'm already excited for next season.
No doubt. So Ashlyn Watkins will be back. Dawn Staley believes sooner rather than later. I mean, so let's just talk about what you missed there. The only underclassman in NCAA history to have over 20 or more rebounds in a Final Four game, 22 rebounds in a national semifinal as a sophomore. Okay. And we all know she's had one dunk in every season in which she played. The last one over 6'7" Sedona Prince in Fort Worth against TCU. But you mentioned the transfer portal. So we'll get to Mylasia Fulwiley, but you know, the big knock on South Carolina was they just didn't have that star go-to bucket getter type of player. Their team was strength in numbers, and so on any night it could come from any different player. But now Dawn Staley says, okay, no problem. We'll just go get the leading scorer in the nation and a walking bucket getter in Tanaya Latson, former high school teammate of Raven Johnson, 5'8", 5'9", two-guard who has incredible range on her three. She averaged over 25 points a game. And she had to, because she was essentially the go-to player. The entire defense knew she was going to get the ball late in games. And I was pulled up that North Carolina game in Chapel Hill. North Carolina led by double digits. FSU kept cutting the lead. It went to overtime. And there's like 4 or 5 seconds on the clock. FSU is down by 1. Tanaya Latson not only got the ball, Michael, she got to the rim for a layup at the buzzer to win that game. She can score from all 3 levels. I mean, a huge addition to South Carolina's roster. When you have perimeter players like that, that also takes pressure and opens up your post game as well.
Yeah, to that exact point, that's what I was going to bring up is, I mean, yes, she is the nation's leading scorer. This is exactly what everyone kind of was waiting to see would happen in terms of, okay, South Carolina didn't necessarily have a dude last year. They had a whole bunch of dudes, but they didn't have a dude. You know what I'm saying? And so you bring in the nation's leading scorer, and now it's all right, like they have a certified bucket getter. But when you're in the game and you have a certified bucket getter like that, the attention's going to go to them. Extra defensive attention is going to go to Tanaya Latson this season. And to your point, that opens it up for everyone else. And South Carolina has such a talented roster that if Tania Latson needs to get 10 assists because she's double teamed, they will be just fine. Like if they take Tania Latson out of a game, if a defense takes Tania Latson out of the game, from an impact perspective, South Carolina should, in theory, be fine with the rest of with the talent level of the rest of that roster. But I personally am very excited to see how that works out this coming season. I talked to Raven and Tania's high school coach for a story about a month ago, and she talked about how much of a 1-2 punch they were in high school in transition. I'm excited to see how that kind of translates to the college level. I think it'll be a must-see television in those first couple of games to see how Raven and Tania, that chemistry, how that kind of bleeds out onto the court, but also just how Tania is able to impact the game beyond her scoring.
No doubt. And she is a willing passer. I mean, there's no doubt about that. So South Carolina also adds 6'6" Medina Okot, a native of Kenya who played at university there for 2 or 3 years, played this past season at Mississippi State. She averaged 11 points and 10 rebounds per game in SEC play, 9.8 for the season. Just in 22 minutes, she's essentially getting a double-double. I think she adds a presence in the low post South Carolina did not have last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there were several times down the stretch of the season where South Carolina was getting beat in the post, whether you are talking about like strictly rebound statistics or just from a physical standpoint, where South Carolina was getting beat. And it was like, all right, if Ashlyn Watkins was here, maybe this wouldn't be the way that it is. Obviously, we don't know the exact timeline for when Ashlyn will come back, but I think Medina Okot is like the perfect. You can put her in the starting lineup. You can bring her off the bench as depth. I think to your point, a double-double in SEC play. I mean, like what it was 22 points and 23 rebounds against Vandy at one point during this past season. It's very much like Dawn Staley heard everyone saying, oh, South Carolina doesn't have a dominant big. Oh, South Carolina doesn't have a go-to scorer. And she said, okay, I'll just go get those two things. And she has proceeded to do just that. So I think it'll be interesting to see if Okot kind of comes off the bench to start the season or if she is going to be kind of plugged in the starting lineup. Don't really know how that'll all fit. But I think regardless, brings immediate help to the post and brings depth no matter how much you play her or win.
No doubt. I mean, 2 other additions to the roster. Agot McKeer, the 6'1" guard from Canada, played at Montverde Academy, actually born in North Dakota. She got out of there, but still Toronto and North Dakota, not much difference in the wintertime. And then Isla McDowell, who I thought raised her stock immensely in the All-Star games, from the McDonald's game to the Jordan Brand game to the Nike Hoop Summit. I mean, she at 6'2" is just a bucket getter, can score from all 3 levels, rebounder position. And, I'm looking at next year and I'm seeing probably Raven Johnson, Tania Latson, and Tessa Johnson, who led the team in 3-point shooting this season. I think now with Full Wiley gone, that opens it up even more for Tessa Johnson, who quite frankly, you kind of knew what you were going to get, even though she went through shooting slumps with Full Wiley. And so let's address that, okay? Unfortunately for her, she's got the helicopter mom, wanted her out of the program, wanted her to go someplace where she could be in control of the ball, made demands. Then they fire the agent because nobody's out there willing to give her $1 million to come play for them because Dawn Staley, after 2 years, still couldn't trust her to be on the floor at end of games. I thought she got, quite frankly, embarrassed by AZ Fudd in the national championship game, picking her pocket twice. That's normally what she does to players. I know publicly Malaysia Fulwale's denied this, but there was some remorse. According to my sources, she did want to stay with the team. She made that call. And Dawn Staley decided the juice is just not worth the squeeze. And she's gone, didn't even make an official visit to LSU. Kim Mulkey willing to throw out a bag to get one of those McDonald's All-Americans, I guess, from Dawn Staley. When we look at 2 seasons of her play, you saw the potential for the spectacular, but at the same time, just not the high basketball IQ, very turnover prone, and to quote Forrest Gump, kind of like a box of chocolates. You just never knew what you were going to get when she was on the floor.
Yeah, I obviously can't speak too much on what happened behind the scenes with everything, but I think when Taniyah Latson hit the portal and everyone was kind of thinking, okay, well, there's the obvious Raven Johnson connection there. What are the odds that they bring her in? It was kind of, all right, well, let's think about this. You have 3 guard spots, and I know fans, when I wrote the story after Taniyah committed, everyone was like, no one cares about who's in the starting lineup. This is South Carolina, like everyone's going to play. And I'm like, yes, that is true. Like Tessa Johnson and Malaysia Fulwale played almost 20 minutes a game coming off the bench last year. But being in the starting lineup is still a thing. So when they bring you're sitting there in the offseason, and it's okay, do they bring Taniyah in? And if Taniyah comes in, does Raven stay? If Raven leaves, does that mean Taniyah is not coming? And then you're just kind of like moving pieces and parts. And so when Taniyah came in and Raven decided to stay, it was like, all right, you got this 3rd guard spot. You're going to have to make one of these soon-to-be juniors come off the bench. And again, it's really a matter of 5 minutes of action per game. Like they're still going to be playing a whole lot, but whose ego is going to be bruised, who's not going to want to come off the bench. So it was I think everybody was just kind of thinking, all right, it's probably going to be either of Tessa Johnson or Fulwale that hits the portal. So I wasn't necessarily surprised that one of the 2 of them left. Going to LSU was a little bit surprising. I think I wrote a story, said 7 potential spots, and I think some of them were like the Under Armour schools, and you had kind of the sleeper programs that were part of her initial commitment in, LSU and Louisville. And Ole Miss and Louisville. And then you're like, hey, these 2 giant programs in Southern Cal and LSU, I don't know what their finances look like, but they probably got a lot of money hanging around somewhere. So LSU is kind of crazy. I think that'll make that game in Baton Rouge a whole lot more interesting come fall or winter, spring, whenever the game lines up to be. But they played Malaysia Fulwale. They played against her former teammates in the U.S. 3x3 Nationals or whatever, and everything seemed to go fine then. So maybe it'll just be us blowing it up, and then nothing goes crazy.
Yeah, I think, obviously she's going to be super motivated to play against her team. But, when you look at it, statistically, she played in all 39 games. She shot less than 26% from 3, 33 for 128. She was second to Tahina Paopao in attempts. And then you got Tessa Johnson, who shot 43% from 3, 46 for 107. And Malaysia Fulwale also led the team in turnovers with 73, which is about 2 per game. In a lot of games, it was 4 or 5. After 2 years and making demands, I can see Dawn Staley's point of view with where her program is. No one player is bigger than the program. And the last time somebody tried to make demands as a returning player, they wound up getting bounced out and going the transfer portal. And that was the 6'5" center from Texas, who came out the same year as Brittany Griner, and they were number 1 and number 2 in the country. And so I really think it's a net gain, quite frankly. I mean, do you lose some of the spectacular individual plays of the wrapping the ball around your back and flipping it up off the glass or the behind the back passes? Maybe so, but I would urge everybody that's watching and listening to check out Tania Latson's highlight film. She is very crafty. She kind of reminds me a little bit of Tiffany Mitchell. She had to be a prolific scorer. I don't think she'll average 25 a game for South Carolina, but I think just the threat of her having those takeover games will benefit a Tessa Johnson, a Maddie McDaniel when they're on the floor at the same time. Ashlyn Watkins, Joyce Edwards, Chloe Kitts, and the bigs like Medina Okot, Miriam Dowda, and Adele Tack as well.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to watch beyond this season too, because I feel like with Fulwiley leaving, that takes away a younger piece of the potential future core. That was something that I've thought about kind of the most, now that we're a couple weeks out from the announcements and everything, is all right, how does this roster look like over the next couple of years? And so I think somebody like Maddie McDaniel's role gets a lot bigger. As this soon to be sophomore, these incoming freshmen and Isla McDowell and Akot McKeer, they're coming in and it's like, all right, like you guys have to I feel like they had to bring up the pace a little bit faster, because you lose Tania after a year, and then Raven's gone, and then it's all right. It's Tessa. Those starting three guards immediately becomes Tessa, and then pick your poison of the three left. So that's one thing that I've completely not even answering what you were talking about. It just kind of popped into my head a second ago, was kind of the future roster construction of this team going forward and how kind of Fulwiley's transfer impacts that. But I do think, to your point, yes, I feel like Tessa was a lot more steady than Fulwiley was towards the end of the season. And we saw a lot of that where Fulwiley was pulling up from three and they weren't going in, or she'd have a turnover down the stretch. And it's one of those where I definitely can see kind of an addition by subtraction point of view on that. But I don't know. We'll see how things pan out. We won't know until we start playing actual games.
No doubt. So I do think the class of 2026 will be a big class for Dawn Staley.
Yeah.
They've already had the number one player in the country, Sanaya Hall, who was teammates with Agat McKeer at Montverde Prep on campus. They're one of her top schools. Olivia Edwards from Tacoma, Washington. Not 6'3". They list her 6'3". You can see in the picture with Dawn Staley, she's probably 6'5", and kind of like an Ashlyn Watkins type of athlete. She routinely throws it down with two hands. And there'll be other players as well. I think I looked at a list. South Carolina was mentioned with 7 or 8 of the top 11 players in the class of 2026. So I think, there's always the transfer portal, but when Dawn Staley is due for a big class, she generally comes through at this point.
Yeah, you can definitely say she knows what she's doing.
No doubt. So speaking of Dawn Staley, they recently revealed the statue there right by the Harris Pastides Alumni Center. Big celebration of that. And then yesterday you had Asia Wilson's A1 shoe line go on sale and sold out in less than 5 minutes online and in Foot Lockers and Dick's Sporting Goods and wherever else. And so a lot going on for now. The coach with the statue and the local hometown hero and role model with the statue.
Yeah, I tried to get some of the A1s for a Mother's Day gift for my mom and was unsuccessful. Yeah, man, it's so cool. Obviously, being a Columbia native, someone who grew up in the area, I remember watching Asia's commitment on TV and the TV in our kitchen growing up. I remember going to the first victory parade when I was in high school. So it's been really cool to, I got to cover Asia Wilson's statue unveiling as a student, and then obviously as a professional getting to cover Dawn's statue unveiling was just really cool, kind of a full circle moment there. But yeah, man, it's a big time to be a South Carolina fan. It's a big time to be South Carolina women's basketball fan in general. So yeah, it's been there's always something going on. I feel like there's never any rest. You got somebody's getting honored with something or something's popping up. It was cool to see sell out right away. I feel like a lot of people over the past couple of years have made a big deal about how, Asia's not marketable, can't do this, can't do that. I mean, selling a signature shoe out in 5 minutes is pretty impressive in my book. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool, all of it, to see not only how much love kind of Columbia has for this program, but how just kind of the country in general and all that has been pretty cool to watch.
So Caitlin Clark actually got a shoe before Asia Wilson did. Mm-hmm. Did her shoe sell out in less than 5 minutes? I mean, look, I know she's revered in Iowa, and she did put a lot more eyes and television sets on women's college basketball, the WNBA. When Indiana goes on the road, teams play the games in bigger arenas because they sell out. But Asia Wilson is the best player in the world.
Correct.
I still remember telling her that when she was early in her junior year. I said, you just don't know it yet, but you are the best player in the world. And she is. And no disrespect to Caitlin Clark because of what she's done for the game. I've seen her play in person, even though they allow her to create a lot of space with her left arm. Some of the stuff she does pulling up from 30 feet in transition and draining threes is incredible. But, it seems Gino Auriemma is averse to statues, so much so that I don't think we're going to see South Carolina and UConn playing in the regular season anymore. I think there was some offense taken at Gino throwing shade at Asia Wilson, which I don't understand, dude. Okay, you just won a national championship, and you're talking about a player winning a national championship and getting a statue, and at UConn, that doesn't even get you on the bus. Sour grapes there? What's the deal with Gino? I mean, he is a grumpy old man. We all know that.
Yeah.
I mean, if they ever redo the franchise, we know Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau are dearly departed. Gino certainly could star as a grumpy old man in the remake of that movie.
When he first made those comments, I admittedly was like, okay, like I can see how South Carolina fans on Twitter are taking offense to this. I can see that point of view. I was like, I personally, when they first made that comment, was like, this kind of feels like it's the context of it being like 2 days after beating South Carolina in the national championship. It was kind of like, if he had said it like a month before, I would have thought it wasn't about South Carolina. Honestly, I thought it would have been a comment in general. But then when Dawn fired back and basically said everything but Gino's name, I was like, all right. So we all understood how everyone else took that. It's that is just kind of whatever. I feel like I get why people are mad about it. I'd be mad about it too if I was Dawn or if I was Asia. So I understand why there was some animosity brewing on social media over the past month, I guess. But I don't know if it would affect them playing. I feel like strictly from an optics standpoint, yes, the contract has not been renewed for the two teams to play, as far as I'm aware. But I feel like if you don't want to end that series right after getting cut in the national title. Like, I feel like you got to at least play one more. Like, I totally understand, what Dawn was saying in the terms of we probably should change our scheduling with the way that we didn't get the number 1 overall seed, protect our peace essentially kind of deal. But I feel like strictly from an optics perspective, if I was Dawn Staley, I'd say, all right, like, let's do it again. Let's get one more contract, and then we'll go from there in terms of maybe it's one more home and home. Maybe it's just agree to one more game. I know it kind of being in February kind of throws off the pace for both teams a little bit, but that's just kind of tradition to play it then. But I don't know. Again, if I was South Carolina, I'd schedule it at least one more time because I just feel like I don't know how much they care about the public perspective, how much they care about the optics of it, but I feel like you can't decide to not renew that series, especially after the last game was losing by that much in the national title. Just my opinion.
So this has been kind of a sore topic in the Garnet and Black Town Hall last night. If you don't know, every Tuesday night for our VIP subscribers to Gamecock Pod Daily, we have a live interactive Zoom call, 45 minutes to an hour. Then we go into an unrecorded overtime. And, the language is not PG-13 at times, especially right now about pulmonary and baseball. But, I had one patron who went off on Gino and UConn, their fan base. And so kind of my retort to Gino is, dude, none of your best players have ever been from Storrs, Connecticut. Okay. Like Breonna Stewart was from upstate New York. Maya Moore was from Atlanta. Tarasi was from California, and she wanted to go to Stanford or Maryland and couldn't get in either one. And so she had to go to UConn. Sue Bird's not from Storrs, Connecticut. None of the greats have been from there. Asia Wilson is a homegrown hero who is the best player in the world. Okay. And not only that, when Dawn Staley took that job, I guess at that point there were maybe 12 teams in the SEC. South Carolina was not only rock bottom, they had to look up to see bottom.
Yeah.
And you get Asia Wilson, and she leads you to a national championship. And the backstory of her family, her grandmother growing up in Columbia, not even being able to walk on the university grounds because of segregation and Jim Crow, to the fact that now Asia led South Carolina national championship, a national champion, a national consensus player of the year, the number 1 pick in the WNBA draft, a multiple-time WNBA champion, MVP, defensive player of the year, and Olympic gold medal. She is the most highly decorated student athlete in the history of the University of South Carolina, more so than George Rogers, who's the only other dude that has a statue.
Exactly. Yeah,
it was so much. Educate yourself, dude. Stop drinking the Moscato and the Chianti wine and eating your pasta while you're at home screaming about Dawn Staley constantly beating you on recruits. Okay? Take into consideration the big picture is my advice, because it is just more than her being a great player who led South Carolina their first national championship.
Yeah, well, Keith, you're asking a lot of people nowadays to tell them to look at the big picture. Asia legitimized the program is obviously means so much more than just a basketball player, to not just the program, but the university and the city of Columbia. I mean, it's one of those where it's like, all right, like, yes, she won a national title. Yes, it was South Carolina's first national title. But yes, to all the points you just made, it's so much more than just that. But I also feel like you want to get up there and complain, like, try to vouch for your players to get a statue. Like, if it's there are no statues outside of that arena up in stores. I mean, if it's like, it's one of those things where if it is that big of a deal, like I see, fans on Twitter and everything talking about, oh, they just giving out statues to everybody. I'm just like, well, like, try to get some for your program. Like, it's one of those things where he's got the pull up there. I don't know why it hasn't been done. If that's just, they just run things differently up there or whatever. But, but yes, to your point, Asia statue is about so much more than that one national title. It's about so much more than basketball. So I don't know. Maybe we can just finally move on from this discussion of who deserves statues and not, even though I did just write a story this morning about who the mayor thinks should be the next, should have the next statue. So now we can move on now that that's been published.
All right. So, I mean, look, I went to Oklahoma for South Carolina's football game with Oklahoma. It's one of the most storied football programs in history. National titles, Heisman Trophy winners. They have a statue for every single Heisman Trophy winner and a statue of all three Selman brothers. Okay, nobody's throwing shade on Oklahoma because they've had so much success. I mean, not to mention the fact that Dawn Staley's built a powerhouse in the toughest women's basketball conference in the country, period. And Gino has to play tough teams in the non-con because they're basically like the ACC. Their conference is the tallest little person. I mean, that's who they're playing. Essentially, the Acme School for Typewriter Maintenance on a weekly basis.
Yeah. It's one of those things where I'm like, all right, can we pick? That's how you know it's the off season, when this is what we're talking about. This is what the discourse is on social media. So we'll get back to actual basketball come October, November, and then we'll go back to that. But yes, this is prime off season conversation of complaining about who does have statues, who doesn't have statues. But can we not just enjoy it for a second? Like, congrats to Dawn, congrats to Asia, and I hope, I hope Gino gets a statue at UConn. I hope he does. He deserves it.
One.
He deserves it. And you know what? I hope Sue Bird and Diana Taurasi and all them get statues. I genuinely hope they do. They deserve it. They helped pave the way for so many players. They deserve it. Go get a statue. That's not my fault they don't have one.
That's right. I agree. And so, odds-on favorite is South Carolina to win the next national championship. Certainly bringing Tania Latson and Medina Okot in, as well as two terrific, look like ready to play wing players in McKeer and Isla McDowell. I mean, this is going to be a deep and talented roster. I mean, somebody out of Chloe Kitts, Joyce Edwards, and Ashlyn Watkins and Medina Okot is not going to be in the starting lineup. Probably two out of those are not going to be in the starting lineup.
Yep, it's a constant embarrassment of riches in this program. It's every coach in America wishes they had, in the terms of we don't know who to put in the starting lineup. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I would not log a prediction yet. You got to give me a month into the season before I figure that out. I want to see what they look like when Ashlyn comes back. But yeah, I mean, if you just look at it on paper, making it to the Final Four feels like, the standard at this point in South Carolina. And I wouldn't be too far pressed to say, hey, they probably can go back. But again, we got to wait till actual basketball's been played before we make that decision.
No doubt. Michael, great stuff as always. I can't thank you enough for being with us. Be well, and we'll look forward to catching up with you down the road.
Yes, sir. Absolute pleasure. Thanks, Keith.
All right, that was Michael Sauls. Remember, again, today's show powered by Prize Picks. All you got to do is download the Prize Picks app in the Apple Store or Google Play. Pick two or more players. You can mix and match sports, basketball, baseball, and go more or less. on how many points or the combined stats, and enter the code Gamecocks to get $50 added to your Prize Picks account after you make your first $5 play, and you don't even have to win. All you have to do is make a $5 play and get $50 added to your account. Download the Prize Picks app, enter the code Gamecocks to get $50 after you make your first $5 play. That's a net of $45 even if you lose. So special thanks, great stuff from Alex Jones from the Big Spur, Michael Sauls from Go Gamecocks and the State. I am Keith Alsep, and this has been a great show. You guys have a great rest of the week. God bless. Go Gamecocks. I am out of here.